It was April 1st, and I found myself driving tiredly down a dusty road that wound its way to our family cabin. After a grueling 3-hour drive from my last gig, the cabin was on my route home, so I figured I'd stop by. My wife, Emma, was supposed to meet me there. I ended up leaving later than I had planned, and the sun had already set by the time I made it close. My new gig, traveling around as a guest lecturer, kept me away from Emma more than I liked, so I was really looking forward to spending the weekend together. She had finally gotten some time off from her busy job as a nurse and was supposed to arrive the day before to stock the cabin with everything we'd need for the weekend. Emma, with her striking brown eyes and slender but fit frame in that nurse's uniform, always managed to catch people's attention, especially the men. We met about 7 years back at my brother Jake's college graduation. Emma had just started her nursing program, and she was there for her friend Sarah's graduation. Jake was dating Sarah at the time, and when the four of us went out for dinner afterward, Emma and I instantly hit it off. She didn't have much experience with relationships, and I was more than happy to show her the ropes. Less than a year later, we tied the knot. Emma had a magnetic personality that I was drawn to right away. She could strike up a conversation with anyone, anywhere. Lately, we've been talking about having kids and maybe buying a house instead of continuing to rent. As I turned off the dirt road and headed toward the small lake, I smiled at the sight of the cabin, but was surprised when her car wasn't parked outside. I thought about calling her, but I knew the cell service out here in the mountains was terrible. After parking the car, I grabbed my bag and walked up to the door. It was locked, but I knew where we kept the spare key hidden. Inside, it was clear no one had been here for a while. The place looked untouched. It was too late to drive all the way back through the mountains, and the sun had completely set by now, so I decided to sit tight and wait. I thought maybe I had mixed up the time she was supposed to arrive. Then it hit me. It was April Fool's Day. We had a history of pulling pranks on each other every year. Maybe she was just running late, or she'd surprise me in the morning. I briefly considered leaving, but in the end, I decided to wait a bit longer. As I looked around the cabin, it became clear there was no food or drinks anywhere. That irritated me, and I figured maybe I should just head out. Just as I stepped outside, I noticed headlights approaching on the road. Thinking it was Emma, I felt a wave of relief. But as the car got closer, I realized it wasn't her. It was a blonde driving a flashy red sports car. Did Emma really take this joke that far? I muttered to myself. The small car pulled up in front of the cabin, and the window slid down. "Are you Matt Harris?" asked the young woman from behind the wheel. I chuckled to myself, thinking this must be part of some elaborate April Fool's prank. "Yeah, I'm Matt." I played along. She stepped out of the car, striking a pose in the process. "I'm not joking," she said, dead serious. "I was hired to deliver this to you, and wait while you read it." She handed me a sealed envelope, and though it didn't seem like a legal notice, I still assumed it was part of the prank. "Rick, sweetheart, before I get to anything else, I just want to say that I love you more today than ever before. I believe our marriage is perfect, and I've never wanted to be with anyone else. Men have flirted with me, but I've never once considered straying from you. Until now. I've been unsuccessful in pushing these feelings away. There's a new doctor at the hospital where I work, and I developed a crush on him. It's not love, just a physical attraction. I need to act on this to get it out of my system. He's married, with a young son, so there's no chance of it becoming anything more than a weekend fling. He loves his wife the way I love you. Today, I left town with him, and we're going to spend the weekend together to put this behind me. To keep things fair and make sure you're not left out, I hired Isabella, a high-class escort, to help you have an equally passionate experience. I couldn't let her take you to a hotel, so I thought our secluded cabin would be the perfect spot. I'll be back Sunday evening around 6 p.m., clean and ready to move forward with our lives together. We'll never speak of this weekend again, and I trust you'll understand why I need to do this. I love you with all my heart, Emma." I reread the letter, and my stomach dropped as I realized this wasn't a joke. The blonde smiled at me. "Do you need a pen?" she asked. "No, I don't need to sign it," I replied. "But you will sign something for me." I quickly added, "You're going to sign a statement saying you delivered this letter on behalf of my wife, Emma Harris, and that she paid you to sleep with me, but I refused." I paused, looking at her seriously. "You'll need to sign with your real name, and I'll need to see your driver's license to confirm it." She giggled, spinning around with a flirty twirl. Are you sure you know what you're passing up? She teased. I ignored her, already scribbling down what I wanted her to sign. She seemed a bit frustrated, but signed the paper. As she turned to leave, I gave her a final warning. Be careful driving back. Lots of animals on these roads at night. And don't mention to Emma that I said no. I'd hate for her to ask for a refund. She smiled and said, My lips are sealed. Are you sure there's nothing I can do to change your mind? Isabella asked, flashing me a sweet smile. You seem like such a kind and decent guy. No thanks, I replied. I've got enough on my plate already. She showed me her driver's license and signed the paper. Mind if I stay the night? She asked. I'm not too keen on driving back on that dark road. I glanced at her name on the ID and considered the risks. Okay, Sarah Davis, but only if there are no funny business and you're sleeping in the guest room, I warned. Try anything, and you'll be out the door in no time. Wow, that's a first for me, she laughed. Usually, things go in a different direction. She added, I was thinking of getting into escorting for real soon anyway, just to help cover my college expenses. I'm about to graduate with a degree in textile engineering. Is that right? I know someone who's looking for textile engineers. Give me your resume after you graduate, and I might be able to help. I offered. She smiled and moved closer as if to hug me, but I held out my hand instead. Sorry, no contact, I said firmly. That evening, we shared some food and drinks from the 3 bags Emma had instructed Isabella to bring along. We sat by the fireplace, and I ended up telling her the story of how I met my wife back in high school. It had been the kind of romance that felt like it was straight out of a fairy tale, at least until recently. As we talked, the tension from the night seemed to ease, and we got along better than I expected. She listened closely and sympathized with me when I explained how Emma had betrayed my trust. I opened up about how we had been planning to start a family after she finished her master's in nursing and how we were about to leave our cramped apartment for a house. When she saw the tears welling up in my eyes, she broke her promise not to touch me. I turned away to hide my face. But the next thing I knew, I was in her arms. There wasn't anything sexual about it. She was just comforting me, trying to help me deal with the pain. Go ahead, let it out, she whispered, and that's exactly what I did for the next few minutes. After I calmed down, I gently pulled away. I'm still not going to, I reminded her. I know, she said, smiling. That's what I like about you. Now, can I share my story? She asked. Of course, we got the whole night, I replied. She took a deep breath and began. I grew up poor in the mountains of Kentucky. My dad worked in the mines, and my mom did laundry for other families. I did well in school, but I had to start working odd jobs from the time I was 12. While my classmates were going to parties and dating, I was juggling work and school. To make things worse, I was skinny and flat-chested, so no one paid much attention to me. Believe it or not, I made it all the way to college without any experience with guys. I scored high enough in math and science to earn a scholarship, but I still had to work to cover the rest of my expenses and save up for a car. After my first year, my body started to change, and suddenly I was getting asked out on dates. She paused to take a sip of the wine we had found in the cabin. I was clueless when it came to guys, and I made a lot of mistakes. Some took advantage of me. I thought they liked me, but they only wanted one thing. Eventually, I met a guy who seemed different. He didn't even try to kiss me until our 3rd date. Things were good between us until Christmas break. He went home and didn't bother to call me for the entire break. I figured it was over, but when he came back, he acted like nothing had happened. I forgave him, and we started sleeping together. Then one night, I told him I loved him. He didn't say it back. He acted like he cared, but those words never came out of his mouth. She paused for a moment, her expression turning bitter. Finally, I asked him about it. That's when he broke down and confessed that he had a girlfriend back home, and he'd even proposed to her. He said he liked being with me, but he couldn't choose between us. So I made the decision for him. You kicked his sorry, but didn't you? I chuckled. Oh, you bet I did, she said with a grin, in front of a dining hall full of our friends. But after that, I couldn't trust anyone. I needed money more than anything, and my roommate suggested I try escorting. At first, it was just being someone's date, but eventually I started offering more services. I didn't cross certain lines until your wife offered me $3,000 to spend the weekend with you. She told me you were amazing in bed and that, well, you're more than well endowed. And that's how we ended up here. If I'm as good as she says I am, Why would she set this whole thing up? I asked, genuinely curious. She told me it was just something she needed to get out of her system, Isabella said with a shrug. The guy she's with put in a lot of effort to win her over, and I think he's the one who paid most of the money for this weekend. She just wanted to make sure you didn't feel left out. We both fell silent, watching the fire crackle and pop in the fireplace. I leaned back on the pillows, trying to make sense of everything. After a while, I put my arm around her shoulders and kissed her on the forehead. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You made the worst day of my life a little more bearable." She turned and looked deep into my eyes. "Emma's a fool for risking losing you like this. There are many good men out there, you know? I wish I could be the one to find you after all this and start fresh." We held each other even tighter, eventually falling asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, Isabella woke up to the smell of sizzling bacon. She rolled over and saw me standing by the stove. "Smells like something good is cooking," she said. I turned around and smiled. "How do you like your eggs?" "Scrambled like our lives right now," she joked, and we both laughed. I toasted some bread and brought over 2 plates of food. "There's coffee too if you want some," I offered. "Yes, please. But first, I really need to use the bathroom," she said with a chuckle, heading toward the nearest door and turning the knob. "Hey, don't pee in the closet." I laughed. "Don't make me laugh," she cried, crossing her legs and walking quickly in little steps. "That door," I pointed to the next one over on the right. "And while you're at it, how about taking off all that makeup and letting your hair down?" "You sure know how to surprise me," she grinned, hurrying off. A few minutes later, I heard water running, and soon after, she came out looking completely different, natural and real. Her pink lace blouse hung loose over her skinny jeans, and her clear skin had a soft pink glow. Her light brown hair fell naturally, reminding me a little of my mother's. "Much better," I said with a smile. "Really?" she asked, giving me a playful look. "Didn't I at least turn you on before?" "Hell yeah," I admitted. I'd have to be dead not to get excited. But I just want to meet the real Sarah, not Isabella. "Rick Harris, do you always say the perfect things?" she teased as she dug into her plate without worrying about her figure. "I forgot what bacon tasted like," she added. After breakfast, she helped me clean up and grabbed her suitcase. "I guess it's time for me to head out," she said, heading toward the door. But I stepped in her path. "I was thinking, my wife paid you to stay with me for the entire weekend, right? So how about sticking around?" "But you said no intimacy," she reminded me. "I know, and I'm sticking to that. But I can't just sit here and wait for Emma to come back after sleeping with that doctor. I'd rather you stay so we can get to know each other better." "But I can't sleep with you. I don't want to be just as bad as her," she insisted. "That's fine. I just thought we could hang out, talk a little. I think there are some board games and cards in the closet. We could even go for a walk or take a swim if you're up for it." "I didn't bring a swimsuit," she replied with a raised brow. "We don't need swimsuits for a swim," I joked. "It's not like we're doing anything crazy. Besides, I'm planning to file for divorce as soon as we get back." "Agreed, Mr. Harris," she said with a grin. "Please call me Rick," I corrected her. "Where'd you get that name anyway?" she asked with curiosity. "When I was born, my face was all wrinkled up like a little bulldog. My parents thought it was funny, but I guess they could have called me Pug, so I lucked out." She chuckled. "Well, I'd say your face turned out pretty good." "Who's talking right now? Isabella or Sarah?" I asked. "Isabella's done. Please don't call me that anymore," she said seriously. "Deal." Meanwhile, Emma was anxiously awaiting the arrival of Dr. Nathan Brooks, her weekend lover. She had left me that note and handed it to Isabella. Dr. Brooks had given her $2,000 to keep me distracted, and she even chipped in more from her own account to make sure she hired someone clean and safe. She didn't want to risk catching any diseases after all. The plan was for Nathan to pick her up around 6 in the evening. I had texted her earlier that morning to say I'd arrive at the cabin just before dark, and Isabella confirmed that she'd get there shortly after. Emma didn't want to risk losing the life we'd built, but Nathan had gotten under her skin. He'd pushed her boundaries until he had her cornered in a storage room one day, where he kissed her. Afterward, he whispered, "You're mine now." And from that moment, she was hooked. Nathan showed up right on time, dressed casually but with an air of confidence. Emma didn't want him coming into our apartment, but he strode in anyway, making a casual comment about how small it was for a teacher and a future head nurse. "Dr. Brooks, we need to go. I don't want any of the neighbors seeing us," she urged. "You're eager to get me into bed?" He smirked. "Actually, I've been turned on all day," he continued. "Now's as good a time as any to take care of that before we head out." "Oh, and feel free to call me Nathan now." "I don't think so," Emma said sharply. "Let's leave now." Emma, he sighed. "I gave you plenty of money to keep your weak, cuckolded husband busy for the weekend. You can at least do what I ask, can't you?" She felt a wave of guilt and excitement at being ordered to do something so wrong. "Okay here?" Emma asked as she reached for a zipper. "My husband is no weakling, and if you say anything more about him, this weekend is over." "Not here, in your bed," Nathan said, throwing more insults my way. "No, please, not there. Anywhere else." "Not an option," he replied coldly. "Look, if you don't want to please me here, why should I bother going away with you for 2 days?" Once in the bedroom, Emma turned and saw him undressing. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I thought you might want to see and touch my body first," he replied confidently. She watched him as he undressed. He had an even tan, a flat stomach, and decent biceps, but where it mattered, he was either average or a little below. He stripped completely and lay on the bed, hands behind his head. This wasn't what she had imagined. There were supposed to be roses, soft caresses, massages, and plenty of foreplay. Instead, she just satisfied his needs, all while he closed his eyes and began to humiliate her. "I bet your husband can't turn you on like this," he muttered. "And just think, you've rented this body for 3 days and 2 nights. When they finished, she rushed into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. After taking a deep breath, she returned to the bedroom and saw him, still naked, lying on their marital bed. "We're done," she snapped. "I told you not to say anything about him." She grabbed her clothes and left the room in a hurry. "Damn it, Nathan," she muttered while getting dressed. He realized he had pushed too far, but he still believed he could charm her and win her back before they arrived at the resort. Emma stood by the kitchen window, tears in her eyes as she thought about me, imagining I was in bed with a beautiful woman, doing things we'd never done. It was getting dark, and she realized it was too late to go to the cabin and stop everything. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Nathan's footsteps behind her. "Emma, baby, I'm so sorry about what happened," he said softly. "I thought you wanted me to be a bit more dominant, but I promise I won't mention him again. Let's start fresh and make this the best weekend of our lives." His fingers massaged her shoulders, and she leaned into him. "I don't want dominance. I just wanted to feel love from another man," she confessed. She felt his hands drift from her shoulders to her chest. For a moment, she thought about asking him to leave, but realized she'd already gone too far. "Nothing more until we reach the resort," she insisted. Meanwhile, after a long walk, Sarah and I stopped by the lake. She started taking off her jeans, preparing for a swim. "Turn away," she blushed. "You must be joking," I teased. "How many men have seen you like this?" "You," she said, tugging at her jeans. "I told you that Isabella is gone. Only Sarah remains." Tears welled up in her eyes as she ran out of the house. After a few meters, I caught up to her and placed my hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, please stop. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed and said that. I know you're no longer Isabella. I'm really enjoying getting to know Sarah." She wiped her tears and finally smiled. "I didn't lie to you. You were supposed to be my last escort date, but when I met you, everything changed." I reached out and shook her hand. "How about a walk around the lake?" I suggested. "That sounds nice," she replied. We spent the next hour strolling hand in hand, talking about our likes and dislikes. We both loved Elton John and CCR, and we shared a passion for cooking and Mexican food. By the time we returned to the cabin, we were both hot and sweaty. "Sarah, how about a swim in your underwear?" I asked. "Yeah, I'd love that," she laughed. I turned around to give her privacy, hearing her steps as she walked toward the water. "Hurry up and catch me," she teased. I quickly stripped down and ran after her, wearing just my boxers. She was already waist-deep in the water, dressed in a tiny pink bra and thong. "Oh, it's cold," she yelped as I splashed into the water beside her. I tackled her playfully, and we both went under for a moment. When I pulled her back up, she coughed and gasped for air. "Keep coughing," I urged, hitting her back lightly. After a few seconds, she was smiling again, and she pulled me in for a long, deep kiss. Our wet underwear clung to our bodies, and soon, neither of us could feel the cold anymore as our hands explored and our tongues intertwined. Back in the car, Nathan leaned over and whispered into Emma's ear, "I've got flowers and champagne in the trunk, ready for our special night." They were heading down the road toward the resort when her phone buzzed. "I forgot to leave it at home," she said, expecting to see my name on the screen. But it was just a spam call. She quickly turned off her phone to prevent me from tracking her location. Emma closed her eyes and began to imagine me having a night with the beautiful Isabella. "Oh God, what have I done?" she whispered to herself as a few tears fell from her cheeks. A song popped in her head. "It's too late to turn back now." Nathan pulled up to the resort, having checked them in a few minutes earlier. "Here we are, beautiful," he said, noticing her wiping her eyes. "You okay?" Emma couldn't bring herself to look at him. "Nathan, I can't do this. I'm so sorry. I'll give you the money you paid for Isabella," she said softly. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. He leaned back in his chair, visibly controlling his frustration. "Actually, I understand," he replied, calmer now. "But the damage is done. Rick knows you're here with me, so you might as well enjoy yourself. Now he either has intimacy with her or goes nuclear. Either way, you'd better relax and come up with a plan to face him on Sunday night. I promise I won't make you do anything you don't want. If you want to go home tomorrow, I'll take you back." "Really? You take me home and not get angry?" Emma asked, surprised. "You won't tell anyone at work?" "No, Emma. I don't want anyone at work or my wife to know," Nathan reassured her. "Okay, I'll stay tonight and decide in the morning if I want to stay until Sunday," she agreed. "But we can't do anything too bad," she warned him. Nathan smiled to himself, confident he still had a chance to experience her. But for the first time, the thought of an angry husband contacting his wife hit him. Maybe this was a bad idea. Meanwhile, after the kiss, Sarah pulled away from me, giggling, and headed back toward the house, beckoning me with her index finger. She could tell from my wet boxers that Emma had been lying about my worth. Sarah had never been with anyone as big as me. Now, as I followed her, I couldn't help but admire her pink buttocks and large, round breasts. She didn't exactly fit the image of a typical textile engineer. Intelligence and beauty were a great combination, but her past with many men and engaging in handjobs for money dimmed the appeal. The thought quickly lowered my libido. We rushed inside the house, and while I got a fire going, she grabbed some towels. Once the fire crackled, I turned to see her standing completely naked, holding out a large white towel. "Try me, and I'll do the same for you," she said with a playful smile. My hands shook as I rubbed the soft fabric over her shoulders and arms. "That feels so good," she purred. She had never felt this kind of excitement while being with a man. I ran the towel down her smooth back, stopping at the curve of her buttocks. "You're so wet," I whispered, removing the towel and sliding my fingers down. "Oh God, Rick," she moaned, turning to face me, her lips dripping with desire. "Please," she begged. Though Sarah had pleased many men, she had never allowed anyone to do the same for her. When I leaned in to kiss her, she realized that I was different. It was dark when Nathan and Emma returned from dinner at a nearby restaurant. Emma turned on her phone, expecting to hear from me, but there was nothing. "Well, it's clear he didn't go home right away," Nathan commented, moving up behind her and massaging her shoulders. "Isabella is one of those women who can seduce almost anyone." Emma closed her eyes and leaned back into him. "Have you ever, with Isabella?" she asked. "No," Nathan replied, and she was telling the truth when she said she didn't sleep with anyone she knew. According to the other doctors, she's great at pleasing men, but she never lets them do the same for her or kiss her on the lips. As far as I know, this is the first time she agreed to have intimacy with a client. "If I didn't know she was an escort, I might have easily fallen in love with her," he added. "Oh God, no," Emma gasped. "This is what I was afraid of. He can't fall in love with her." She felt Nathan's hands leave her shoulders and move down to her soft breasts. She quickly pushed them aside and turned to face him. "I want to go home," she declared. "Emma, are you really going to leave me like this?" Nathan asked, taking her hand and pressing it to himself. The damage is already done, so why not just enjoy the night? We can talk about how to get Rick back. I feel responsible, and I want to help. He pulled her toward him, his strong arms enveloping her. I need to call Rick and tell him I didn't sleep with you. I'll forgive him because I hired an escort. He should be home tomorrow morning. I'm sure he loves me enough to see this was a mistake, she said, trying to convince herself. I'm sure it will happen, Nathan lied smoothly. Emma's body betrayed her once again as she pressed her lips to Nathan's neck. We can just caress each other, she whispered. But first, I need to take a shower. Would you like to join me? She longed to soap and rinse his body. Yes, Nathan answered immediately. He knew that if he played his cards right and kissed her enough, he'd eventually win her over. Meanwhile, Sarah had never felt this level of desire before. Here she was, in a cozy log cabin with a man she admired and genuinely wanted. Even if she hadn't been paid to spend the night with me, she would have done it for free. At the same time, Emma stood under the hot water, feeling it run down her face, over her chest, and down her flat stomach. Nathan's hands moved over her back and across her white buttocks. This is exactly what I needed, she purred. To feel another man's touch, his kisses, his caresses. It feels so good, she murmured as Nathan pressed her back against the shower wall, lifting her leg before they finally gave in to their desires. The next morning, Sarah woke up first. She found herself pressed naked against my back. How lucky am I, she thought. One night with the man of my dreams, and already I feel something for him that I've never felt before. She was in the middle of her thoughts when I stirred awake. Opening my eyes, I saw Sarah's blonde hair rising and falling over my lower abdomen. After satisfying each other again, we packed our things and started heading out. You know, my soon-to-be ex-wife won't be back until noon tomorrow, I said. Maybe after I freeze a few credit cards and investments, we can rent a room in the city. I was hoping you'd say that, she smiled, pressing her lips to mine. I'd love to get to know you better, Rick. My roommate is gone for a few weeks. Why don't you come stay with me? I don't think you want to be home when Emma gets back. I don't want to be a burden, I replied. Believe me, I want you there so we can talk more, Sarah said. We gathered our things and drove down the winding forest road. The Saturday morning drive went by quickly. When we got back to my house, she didn't need to keep an eye on me anymore. I opened the door from the garage and called out, Honey, I'm home. Let's hope she doesn't answer, Sarah said, not amused by my joke. She wandered around the house while I focused on cutting Emma out of my life. Sarah looked at the wedding photo above the fireplace and, for a moment, imagined herself in Emma's place. Then she walked into the master bedroom and peered into the huge walk-in closet. Why would she risk it all for one fling with some guy? I whispered as I moved closer to her and kissed her earlobe. I want to make love to you on this bed, I said. Her heart raced, but I thought we agreed. No intercourse. You're right, I said, but I want to leave her a little gift on the bed as a goodbye present. I smiled at the idea. When Sarah realized what I meant, she smiled too. Why don't you undress and get ready while I put on some fresh sheets? I suggested. It felt strange lying on the bed I had shared with Emma, waiting for Sarah, not my wife, to join me. My anger overtook the sadness over my failed marriage. Just a few days earlier, Emma and I had been talking about starting a family. Now, I knew I had to stay away from her until I cooled down, if that would ever happen. My attention shifted to the closet door as Sarah emerged wearing a nightgown, the same one Emma had worn on our wedding night. Perfect, I said. This time, the touching and kissing were slower, more deliberate. We savored each kiss. Not having intercourse was tough, but I knew it was important not to stoop to Emma's level. When we finished, a large wet spot covered the middle of the bed. We cleaned up and made the bed before leaving. I tossed all the photos of us together, including the wedding album, into the trash. Looking into the nightstand, I found Emma's diamond engagement ring, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. I pocketed it but left my wedding ring behind. I didn't write her a note. There was nothing left to say to the woman who had cheated on me. Meanwhile, Emma had refused to let Nathan take her again that night, but he persuaded her to stay until Sunday. Her thoughts kept drifting back to her marriage, and it was clear she wasn't enjoying herself. She was simply going through the motions. By Sunday afternoon, Nathan parked in front of Emma's apartment. "Do you see Rick's car?" he asked. "No," Emma replied, scanning the area. That means he must have stayed with her. God help me. She took Nathan's hand. I'm sorry for ruining our weekend. I love my husband too much to ever do this again. I understand, Nathan lied. I feel the same way. I'll never cheat on my wife again. Afraid of being seen, Emma didn't kiss him goodbye. She simply glanced at the condominium door, feeling guilty. Well, that's it, she thought to herself. Now it's time to start a family and grow old with Rick. Emma had no idea what was coming. She took her small suitcase to the laundry room to wash away any trace or scent of her affair. She didn't notice the basket with my dirty clothes from my trip. So lost in her thoughts, trying to figure out what she would say to me, she didn't notice the wet shower floor or the missing photos from the house until she opened the nightstand drawer and found my wedding ring instead of hers. No, Sarah, you don't have to do this. I can rent a hotel room for a few days, I said as we sat on the sofa together. My left hand rested on her shoulder. She took my hand in hers and leaned her head against my body. You don't have to be alone, she said softly. I really like being with you. It's crazy, but I feel like I've known you for so long. I pulled back slightly and pressed my lips to hers. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but a warm, comforting one. You've given me light in my darkest time, I admitted. My best friend is Emma's brother Mike, so who knows how long this night will last. I hesitated for a moment before adding, I was thinking about the money you took for this weekend. I want you to return it, but I need to pay off I'll pay it no matter how much it is. You didn't have to stay, but you did anyway. As I leaned in to kiss her again, my phone buzzed. She's home. Are you going to answer? Sarah asked. No, I don't want to talk to her anymore, I said, ignoring the call. A few minutes later, I checked and saw that she had left a message. I deleted it without listening. Emma, desperate to save our marriage, had left that message. Rick, honey, I know you're angry, but Dr. Brooks and I didn't have intercourse. We just fooled around a little, kissed and touched each other, but nothing more. He wanted to go further, but I stopped him. I know how stupid I've been, and despite the fact that you spent time with an escort, I forgive you. I came home early and found your wedding ring. I also saw my honeymoon nightgown on the floor. Please tell me you didn't let that escort wear it. That nightgown is sacred to our marriage. I don't know where you are, but please come home. I love only you. Your wife forever, Emma. Exhausted and conflicted after her time with Nathan, Emma decided to rest. She pulled back the covers of the bed and screamed when she saw the huge wet spot on the sheets. The smell hit her hard, and she rushed to the bathroom to throw up. She had made a vow not to have intercourse in our bed, and yet, now everything she had imagined happening had become a harsh reality. Grabbing a blanket from the closet, she went downstairs and lay down on the sofa. When she woke up, it was already dark, with only the porch light giving her enough illumination. She grabbed her phone to check for any messages from me, but there were none. Instead, she found a message from Nathan. Well, did he give up or go nuclear? Should I be worried? She called him immediately, unconcerned about where he might be. He's gone, she said. I haven't heard from him, but he left his wedding ring, so prepare for an explosion. Damn, Emma, we could lose everything, even our jobs, Nathan replied. Is it really that bad? It looks like he brought Isabella into your house, slept with her in your bed, and threw your pictures in the trash. Hopefully, that's the end of it, but knowing Rick, there might be more. I told him we didn't have intercourse, so maybe you can use that lie with your wife, Emma suggested. Nathan hung up, sitting down to watch his son chase lightning bugs in the backyard. He had been so sure that I would be okay with the idea of an exchange if I got a hot escort in return. He had never been more wrong. The next day, Emma, now panicking, called my parents to see if they knew where I was. They didn't. Why don't you know where he is? They asked. She hung up, realizing they were suspicious, and called her brother Mike. Hey, little sister, how are you? Mike, have you heard from Rick? No, why? What's going on? Later, while shopping, Emma discovered her credit card had been declined. That was the final confirmation that I had cut her off. She sent 2 more texts and left voicemails, but I didn't respond. Unable to bear it anymore, she called Roger, the dean of my department at the university. Roger, this is Emma. Have you heard from Rick? There was a pause on the other end. Emma, I don't want to get involved. What did he tell you? Nothing. I just need to know. Look, all I know is that he asked for some time off. He said he was okay, but he didn't sound like his usual self. "Goodbye, Emma." Click. "I've got a week off to clear my head," I told Sarah. "Why don't we go to Silver's restaurant for a nice steak?" "Do you really want to be seen together? What if someone recognizes us?" "It's fine," I reassured her. "How about you wear one of those hot dresses from Emma's closet?" Sure enough, as soon as we walked into the restaurant, I spotted one of Emma's colleagues waiting for a table. I thought about leaving, but instead, I decided to stay and start the rumor mill. She didn't notice me until she turned around, but the shocked look on her face made it clear she knew about Emma's weekend with Dr. Nathan Brooks. "Oh my God! And, Darlene, how's everything with David?" I asked, knowing the man standing next to her wasn't her husband. "Oh, this is Jack. He started working in our department a few months ago, around the same time as Dr. Brooks." "Yes," Jack grinned. "We came together." "How do you know Darlene?" Jack asked, but before I could answer, Darlene quickly interjected. "Our table is ready, Jack," she said, pulling him by the hand. "See you later, Rick." As Sarah and I sat down, she leaned in and whispered, "Looks like Emma and Dr. Brooks' secret tryst made the front page." Sarah had picked up on the tension. Emma had been crying nonstop since her parents called her. They had spoken to my parents, and now all four of them were worried. Emma had to hang up the phone, overwhelmed by the pain of losing the only man she had ever loved. About an hour later, Emma's phone rang again. She hoped it was me, but it was Darlene. "Emma, how's your weekend going?" Darlene asked. "It's terrible, Dare. I tried to call it off, but it was too late. The night was good, but not as great as I imagined it would be." "How's it going with Jack?" "Well, tonight should be interesting, because I just saw Rick walk into Silver's with a hot blonde on his arm." "Damn, she must be the same escort we paid for," Emma sighed. "He still had his wedding ring on, and now he's canceled our credit cards. Why did I let Nathan talk me into hiring a gorgeous escort?" "Well, since he's not talking to you, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He's probably in Silver's with her now," Darlene added. "She keeps looking at us," Sarah whispered, picking up her menu. "She's probably calling your wife." "Don't call her my wife anymore," I said, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. My heart broke when I read the letter she left me. "So, Sarah, have you met anyone recently who interests you?" I asked, changing the subject. "Maybe," she giggled. "I'm not sure yet. He seems like a nice guy. Good in bed, too. But I think we still have a few cards left to play. I'm hoping for a royal flush of hearts." I teased as she took my hand in hers, our eyes meeting in a playful exchange. Just then, a scream pierced the air. "Get away from my husband and take off my dress!" Emma shouted. We both froze in shock, and before Sarah could react, Emma's open palm came swinging toward her face. Luckily, I caught her wrist just in time, twisting it behind her back. "Stop it now," I commanded. The entire restaurant went silent as everyone turned to watch the commotion. Emma suddenly went limp and fainted in my arms. Darlene rushed over. "I'm a nurse. Please step back. Someone get me water and a clean towel," she yelled. A cold towel from the bar brought Emma back to consciousness. At first, she seemed confused, but then her eyes met mine. "Rick, honey, I'm back. I have a ring in my pocket. This was all a misunderstanding. I didn't sleep with Nathan, and it's okay that you had sex with her," she said, glaring at Sarah. "Emma, sit down and drink this," Darlene whispered, handing her a glass of water. Emma looked around for Jack, but he was nowhere to be found. She sipped the water, her eyes never leaving me as I walked toward Sarah. "Let's go, Sarah," I said firmly. "Her name is not Sarah, it's Isabella, and she's a—" Emma started to shout, picking up a glass of water, ready to throw it at her. I jumped in front of Sarah, and the glass hit my upper body, spilling its contents before shattering on the floor. "Ah!" I groaned, realizing the blow was harder than I expected. I glanced at Emma, then stepped away from the broken glass, guiding Sarah out of the restaurant. The evening manager, Sean, had been recording everything on his phone. "Sean, send me a copy of that, okay? You have my number, right?" "Yeah, Rick, I've got it. Do you want me to call 911? "They're already here," Sean replied. I called them when she fainted. "What happened?" asked a paramedic as she approached, carrying her medical bag toward Emma, who was now sitting on the floor, supported by Darlene. "She fainted," Darlene explained. "I'm a nurse, and her pulse is racing." She needs her blood pressure checked. Plus, I think she hurt her right elbow and hit her head when she fell. While the paramedic checked on Emma, her partner approached me as I tried to move my sore shoulder. The bartender was cleaning up the broken glass. "Rick, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. Let's go home, and I'll make up for this weekend," Emma pleaded. "I think you've done enough damage for one day," I said coldly. "You have until tomorrow evening to pack your things and get out of the apartment. Get yourself a lawyer, because it's over between us," I said firmly. "Sir, you need to go to the emergency room for an x-ray," the male paramedic said. "Looks like you have a crack in your collarbone." Darlene called Emma's brother, Mike, to come and talk to her, as Emma refused to go to the hospital where she worked, knowing that rumors would spread quickly. About 10 minutes later, Mike arrived, but Sarah and I had already left. "What the hell happened?" Mike asked. "Oh God, Mike. Rick just left for the hospital with the escort I hired. I hit him with a glass, and he told me not to come home." "What are you talking about?" Mike asked, bewildered. "I think you only have bruises on your arm, and I don't see any marks on your head. Does anything else hurt?" "Only my heart. I just lost the only man I've ever loved," Emma said tearfully. I had enough to deal with between Emma and the fallout of the divorce. After she hit me with a glass of water, I was able to get a restraining order. Emma eventually gave in when I threatened to expose the letter and the messages she had sent me. It was clear that she and Dr. Nathan Brooks had paid for an escort to sleep with me while they indulged in their own affair until they passed out. Thanks to the evidence I had, the adultery charge held up in court, and Emma couldn't contest it. Sarah returned the money she had been paid for escort work, which was enough for the judge to refuse alimony and grant me a 70-30 split in my favor. As for Dr. Brooks, this was his second affair, and his wife got the majority of their assets in the divorce. He lost his job at the hospital and ended up working the night shift at a local medical pharmacy. Emma, on the other hand, suffered a nervous breakdown. It took her over a year to come to terms with the fact that our marriage was truly over. Every time a man walked into her room, she thought it was me coming to take her home. She tried dating again, but no one could replace me in her eyes. Her biggest regret was paying for an escort who eventually fell in love with me. After retiring, she moved to the villages in Florida and became something of a bingo expert. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated with honors and moved to North Carolina to escape the rumors and whispers that had followed her. She lived with a fellow graduate classmate and worked as an engineer when one day there was a knock on her apartment door. She thought it was just a neighbor, but when she opened the door, she nearly fell over in shock. It was me, standing there with a large bouquet of pink roses. A card with her name, Sarah, was attached. It had been a year since we first met, and we had only exchanged a few messages during that time. "Oh my God! What? Why? I don't understand," Sarah stammered. I had hired a private investigator to follow Sarah, and I knew she spent most of her time at work. She wasn't dating much and had long stopped working as an escort. I wanted to be completely free from the divorce process before looking into my heart to plan for the future. Many women had shown interest in me, but the bad experience with Emma left me hesitant. I often thought about my time with Sarah and decided to take a chance. God, I hoped I wasn't making a mistake. "Hello, ma'am. My name is Rick, and I'm pleased to meet you," I said, smiling. Her smile melted my heart as she played along. "How do you know my name, sir? And how do you know where I live?" "What is this, an April Fool's joke?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. Inside, she wanted to jump into my arms and wrap her legs around me. "You see," I began, "I was driving through Kentucky and I stopped at a gas station. I asked a nice man if he knew a beautiful blonde named Davis who lived nearby. I told him that her dad was a coal miner and her mom ran a laundromat. The older man said his brother, Samuel Davis, was a retired miner, and his daughter-in-law ran a laundromat just a block away. "You must mean my niece, Sarah Sue, who's working as an engineer in North Carolina," he said. "Why do you ask?" I grinned. I told him I had a question to ask you. Maybe I should have told him to get his shotgun ready, I joked. "No, not exactly, but close." "So, no, ma'am, this is not an April Fool's joke. I spoke to your father and asked for his permission." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and her smile lit up the entire room. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My answer is yes.